Guilty Gear Strive 2 just released. Not really an official sequel to the game, but a huge update. The biggest the game has seen so far, and I love Guilty Gear. I've been playing it for decades now, so I wanted to do something today to celebrate this release. However, I couldn't really make a video explaining how you play the game or showing off some sweet combos because, as I said, I have been playing the game for decades, I have been good at it for, none of them. Yeah, remember, this is Xrd Arcade, and the motto of Xrd Arcade is, we love fighting games even though we're bad at them. So then I thought maybe I could do a character breakdown of everyone, or explain the lore a little bit, but we're going to one day do a full-blown retrospective on the series, and I'll be covering all that in there. But then I realized what would be the perfect thing to talk about. A thing that this game has loved ever since the start, and a thing that I have used to make up like 50% of my personality. References! Yes, Guilty Gear was made by Daisuke Ishiwatari, and if you know anything about Daisuke Ishiwatari, this guy loves rock and roll. Heavy metal, punk, alternative, thrash, you name it, this guy can name more of it. He lives and breathes rock and roll, and for nearly 3 decades now, he's used this fighting game series to be a giant love letter to everything that made him who he is. So many cores of this game are meant to feel like you're entering his own personal record shop. The stages are meant to evoke the feeling of heavy metal. The actual posters and promo art for the game feel like they're direct salutes to 80s rock band albums. Many people have compared the story of Guilty Gear to a rock opera. It's clear what the tone of this series is supposed to be. But it goes far beyond just the tone. So many characters in this series are just straight up direct references to some of his favorite musicians. Yeah, Daisuke got a chance to make a fighting game, and he decided he was going to make it his own personal rock and roll Smash Bros. So today, I'm going to do something special for us. I'm going to go through the history of this entire franchise, pointing out every single music reference in Guilty Gear. Ah, yes, the asterisks. So, a little clarification first. I started writing this video thinking it would be something fun and easy. Oh boy, did I not know what I was getting myself into. I figured this game had maybe like a dozen references in it. No, not even close. Almost every single character has multiple references to them. In fact, here's some behind the scenes info. This isn't the first time this video went up. First time that I uploaded it, it got a copyright claim, and normally I would just mute the music during that scene. But within minutes of uploading it, people were pointing out so many things that I missed that I decided, you know what? Maybe this is a sign. This is my second chance. Let's just redo the entire video. Yeah, this was the first time that I have ever been glad to get a copyright claim. That felt weird to say. But back to the topic at hand. One of the reasons it's so hard putting together a comprehensive list of references is because outside of a very small handful of examples, Daisuke Ishiwatari has never actually come out and said, yes, this is a reference. Meaning almost all the references in this game have been discovered by fans. And by discovered, I mean they're taking their best guess at it. Yeah, I looked through so many forums and wikis and servers trying to put together every reference that people had found, only to learn like half of them were just based on vibes. So even though this video is called Every Music Reference in Guilty Gear, it's a little bit more accurate to call it every theory that people have about the musical references in Guilty Gear that I think might be real. But, you see how that one doesn't really roll off the tongue. Yeah, to keep this from just being sheer madness, I'm leaving out all the things that I'm not sure are real. If someone says something is a reference, but it sounds unlikely to me, yeah, I'm going to skip it. But again, even on this second attempt, I'm sure there are still tons of things that I missed. So if you think of anything, feel free to let me know in the comments down below. Also, normally I would wait until the end of the video to bring something like this up, but considering that we already got a copyright claim, I should go ahead and say it. Thank you to our patrons for all their support. It's because of their financial backing that we're able to have a little bit of a safety net for when that inevitably happens a second time on this video. If you want to join them and get bonuses like your name and credits or early looks at upcoming videos, check the description down below. Thank you to them again for their support, and now, let's get into this massive, massive undertaking. We're going to start at the beginning with all the characters from the very first game, so let's look at the protagonist of the series himself, Soul Bad Guy. And as you can probably guess, his name is a reference. In fact, both of his names are a reference. Yeah, Soul Bad Guy is not his actual name. It's Frederick Balsara, as in Freddy Balsara. as in Freddie Mercury. That's right, Soul Bad Guy's real name is literally just the real name of Freddie Mercury. Yeah, I wasn't kidding when I said that this was just Daisuke's personal Smash Bros. He has said many times that his favorite band is Queen, so when he was given the chance, he just shoved Queen's frontman right into this game. But Freddie Mercury wasn't always with Queen. He did split off for a brief period of time to have a solo career, in which he released the album Mr. Bad Guy. Yep, Soul Bad Guy's real name is just Freddie Mercury's name, and his name after becoming a gear is Freddie Mercury's solo album. Daisuke loves Freddie Mercury so much, he named his protagonist after him twice. By the way, thank you to everyone who pointed that one out to me. Yeah, as I mentioned, we had to take down the original version of this for the copyright claim, but I'm kinda glad that we did, because within minutes of uploading that original video, people pointed out, you kinda missed a big one. Yeah, I was so busy looking up Queen references, I totally forgot about Freddie's solo career. Also, here's something that I have to point out. In the song, Mr. Bad Guy, there's a lyric, "I feel like the president of the USA." And the story of Guilty Gear Strive heavily revolves around Soul Bad Guy having to protect the president of the USA. No way is that a coincidence. But speaking of the Queen references, they don't stop there. Soul's original theme was called Keep Yourself Alive. Guess what the first track of Queen's debut album was called? Keep Yourself Alive. And in the end of Guilty Gear Strive story mode, Soul opens a garage that's called Jazz, which granted is a type of music, so it could just be a reference to that, but it was also the name of one of Queen's albums. And considering that I found interviews with Daisuke wearing a shirt for that exact album, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's where it comes from. And Soul's headband says Rock You on it. I promise that word is rock, it is not the other word that you're all thinking of. But anyone who is familiar with Queen knows what Rock You is a reference to.
We will rock you!
And here's what I love about this reference so much. It has been stated in the character bios that Soul Bad Guy's favorite band is also Queen. Yeah, when this game originally came out, Daisuke Ishiwatari didn't just design Soul Bad Guy, he was even voicing the character in the very first game. So it is clear that Daisuke put a lot of himself into this character, quite literally sometimes, and that includes making his favorite band Queen. Which means that Soul Bad Guy engraving Rock You onto his headband isn't just the director of this game turning and winking to the audience. No, it's actually the character canonically within the game itself saying, I am going to pay tribute to my favorite band. I love that. And one last Queen reference, and this one is actually pretty clever. In Strive, Johnny has an overdrive where he turns you into a card and slashes you up, with each character having their own card, either King, Queen, Jack, or Joker. And Soul is the only male character in the game who gets turned into the Queen card. That's really good, a real blink and you miss it kind of detail. But moving away from the Queen references, Soul's first two instant kills were named All Guns Blazing and Napalm Death. The first of those being a song by Judas Priest, and the second one being a name of a British band. And in Guilty Gear Xrd, Soul's outfit has the phrase, "Fight fire with fire" on it. And yes, this is a pretty common phrase, but it's also the name of a Metallica song. And as you will soon see, Daisuke Ishiwatari really likes Metallica. Now, speaking of Soul's accessories, his original weapon was a sword called the Fire Seal, and that is a completely original name. However, the Fire Seal can be merged with 7 other tools, and when all of them come together, they form the ultimate weapon called the Outrage. And the Outrage gets its name from a Japanese thrash metal band from the 80s. How can I be so sure of that one? Well, because starting with the Xrd Games, Outrage's lead vocalist, Naoki Hashimoto, would actually go on to be a singer for Guilty Gear. Yeah, for the past several installments, Naoki Hashimoto has actually been the lead singer for many of the most iconic songs in this franchise, including the absolute headbanger that is Smell of the Game. Yes, he was the one that told you all that is bullshit blazing. Yeah, I'm gonna say it many times throughout this video, but Daisuke really did just take a lot of the musical inspiration that he liked and shoved it directly into Guilty Gear, and in this instance, he literally did that exact thing. He actually said, hey, I really like this musician, I'm going to have this musician sing for my game. But speaking of the Fire Seal, that was just Soul's original weapon. Eventually he would tinker with it and upgrade the weapon into a brand new model that he would refer to as the Junkyard Dog. And I'm pretty sure the name Junkyard Dog comes from a song by Winger, and I say that because A, there is another Winger reference coming up much later in this video, so yes, Daisuke does really like the band Winger, and B, because the song Junkyard Dog sounds like this. Yeah, that definitely sounds like a theme Soul Bad Guy would be down with. Now, there's one other defining feature of Soul Bad Guy that is definitely worth talking about. That is his belt buckle, which he has engraved with the message, free. Big lore reason behind that, again, we'll talk about that in a future video. But his friend slash rival slash kind of son-in-law, Kai Kisk, has a belt buckle that he engraved with the message, hope. Well, those are very likely references to the Iron Maiden song, Revelations, in which there is a lyric, I said I only wanted to include references that I was positive were a thing, and I'll admit I am a little unsure on this one, but I'm still including it simply because there is no way these belts are not a reference to something. Hope and Free are definitely paying tribute to a source, it just feels like that, and out of all the theories I read, this one felt like the safest bet. But speaking of Kai Kisk, his name is also a reference. There was a German metal band founded in the 80s called Helloween, and two of their lead singers were Kai Hansen and Michael Kisk. So when creating this character, Daisuke just took two musicians he liked and smashed their names together. Also, I want to point this out, I have never heard Helloween's music before, but after listening to them for this video, you can totally see where some of Daisuke's inspiration as a musician came from. Some of these guitar riffs sound like they were just plucked right out of these songs and dropped directly into Guilty Gear. Also, I have to say, I kind of find it hilarious that the guy who, when he first appeared, was decked out in crosses, was named for the band Helloween. Then a handful of Kai's moves are named after songs. His most famous move, Ride the Lightning, comes from the Metallica song of the same name, and his instant kill, Rising Force, comes from the Yngwie Malmsteen album Rising Force. Or it could come from the Yngwie Malmsteen song Rising Force. Yes, Yngwie Malmsteen has a song called Rising Force and an album called Rising Force, and the Rising Force song is not on the album Rising Force. But I'm positive that Kai's move is named after one of them because this is what Yngwie Malmsteen's music sounds like. Yeah, there is zero chance that Daisuke is not a fan of this guy. Also, Kai's original theme was called Holy Order, Be Just or Be Dead. This is probably a reference to the Iron Maiden song, Be Quicker, Be Dead. I'll admit this is another one that I had my doubts on, but as you will see as this video goes on, Daisuke is a big fan of Iron Maiden. If there is anything coming up in this video that you think, could that be an Iron Maiden reference? The answer is yes. And lastly, I'll let you know right now, when researching for this video, I found so many people saying that the songs in Guilty Gear were paying homage to other classic tracks, but I'm not going to go into details about any of those because I feel like that's incredibly subjective. I listened to a lot of the tracks that people said were lifting directly from other songs, and I couldn't hear it most of the time. However, I have to give a big thank you to a fan who sent me a little tidbit because I totally missed it and it is kind of awesome. Kai's theme in the Xrd Games, Magnolia Eclair, homages a section of a Judas Priest song. Now, why is that important? Because that Judas Priest song is called Electric Eye. What was Kai's overdrive in the sequel to this game?
Dragon is gone!
Yeah, I'm not going to go into too many details about what that means because again, this is not the lore video, but that is a really keen detail. Thank you very much to that follower for pointing that one out. No pun intended, but good eye. Moving on to the rest of the cast, we got Axl Lowe, the good-natured British time traveler who is always in way over his head. If you know even a little about rock music, you can instantly tell he was named after Axl Rose, the lead singer of Guns N' Roses. He even has long hair and a headband, which is very similar to the style that Rose was known for sporting. And jumping ahead a couple of games, this is one of the weirder references we're going to find in today's video, but if Axl gets hit by Faust's overdrive in Guilty Gear Strive, he'll say either
Nosworth! Badger! Falsicorp!
which were the names of 3 British bands from the 60s, 70s, and 90s respectively. I kinda love this idea. I want to see way more fighting games use random pop culture references as onomatopoeias. Speaking of Strive, in this game Axel got a brand new overdrive called One Vision, in which he freezes time, and I have heard many people say this is supposed to be a JoJo's reference, and while I'm not going to weigh in on that, what I will say is that it is a Queen reference, because One Vision is the name of another Queen song. On to our next fighter. A lot of people have theorized that everyone's favorite dolphin-riding pirate May was named after guitarist Brian May, and I'm a little bit torn on this one because considering that all the other pirates in May's crew are named after months of the year, I would assume that's where May's name came from. But Brian May wasn't just a guitarist, he was the guitarist for Queen. So considering we all know how Daisuke feels about Queen, there's a real good chance he named May after Brian May and then came up with the whole months of the year theme after that. However, speaking of Queen references, May almost had another one. Originally, she was not going to carry around an anchor, she was going to carry around an axe. And that axe was going to have a name. That name? Bohemian. And if you know anything about Queen, you know this.
Scaramouche, will you do the fandango? Thunderbolts and lightning, very, very frightening me.
Yep, originally May's weapon was going to be named after the Queen smash hit, Bohemian Rhapsody. Then we come to Faust, and I want to take a moment to clarify, I'm just talking about musical references in today's video, and I am bringing that up with Faust because holy cow, this guy's entire existence is nothing but references to other sources.
I'm Mary Poppins, y'all!
But very few of them are music related. Like, there's a German band named Faust and a drummer for a Norwegian band named Faust, but honestly, I think Faust is just named after, well, Faust, the main character of a classic German tale about a man who made a deal with the devil, which is where the term Faustian bargain comes from. However, in the first game, Faust was not called Faust. He was a crazy serial killer called Dr. Baldhead, and Bob Marley had a song called Crazy Baldhead. And you know what? Yeah, that definitely feels possible. Also, a lot of people have speculated that Faust being a doctor is a reference to the Black Sabbath song Rock and Roll Doctor, and I can maybe see that one, but it's a bit of a stretch. I'm mostly bringing it up because it's a good opportunity for me to bring up that Guilty Gear's famous round start, Heaven or Hell, might also be inspired by Black Sabbath's song, Heaven and Hell. Again, I'm not positive on that one simply because Heaven or Hell could be a reference to, you know, Heaven or Hell, but it really feels to me like it was inspired by something, and that's the best option I found. Then Chip Zaniff is named after, get this, Chip Z'Nuff, lead singer of the band Enough's Enough. Man, that might be the closest copy and paste we're going to get outside of Frederick Balsara. Also, his early appearance is reportedly based on Billy Idol. You can definitely see it in the design of him when he was younger. Next, let's knock out a couple of quick ones. Cliff Anderson has a move called Soul Survivor, and that is a reference to a song by Halloween. Then Potemkin gets his name from a Russian battleship, not music related, but I still found it interesting. However, his home country's name of Zepp comes from Led Zeppelin. Then Baiken has nothing. Well, okay, she doesn't have nothing. People do have a couple of theories, but honestly, none of them sound very good to me. I'm mostly just bringing her up so people don't think I forgot about her. Although I will say, I do think it's pretty cool that one of the most famous Guilty Gear characters is also one of the most original ones. So that's a handful of characters in a row who don't really have much to talk about. Thankfully, our next character bucks that trend, because we have now come to the assassin who wields her hair like a blade, Melia Rage, whose name comes from the Boston thrash band, Melia Rage. Now you might be wondering, what exactly is Melia? Well, the band claims that they named themselves after a Native American tribe called the Malaya, who they say used to take opium before battle so that way they would go into a rage. But then later they admitted they just made that up. In fact, I looked all over the place, and as far as I can tell, there's no native nation that goes under the name Malaya. So, yeah, it looks like they just made everything up, which really feels like the kind of thing you shouldn't make up. That feels like a problem. But her name was the easy part. Melia might be the winner of most moves named after bands. Her instant kill, Iron Maiden, is named after, you guessed it, Iron Maiden. Her move, Iron Savior, Silent Force, and Chroming Rose are named after German metal band. Her overdrive attack, Winger and Emerald Rain, are named after American and Canadian bands respectively, and her newest overdrive from Guilty Gear Strive, Septum Voices, is named after a Russian metal band. Then her move Mirage probably comes from the Russian band of the same name. I know Mirage is a common word, but the fact that they don't fully translate it and spell it like this, and instead they spell it like this, which is how that Russian band's name would be romanized, yeah, I feel pretty confident in this one. And moving into her backstory, the magic that allows her to control her hair is called Angra, which is the name of a Brazilian metal band. Once again, thank you to a follower for sharing that one with me, totally missed it. And one final reference, I would be willing to say that her move Bad Moon is a reference to Bad Moon Rising by Creedence Clearwater Revival. I know that feels a bit outside of Daisuke's wheelhouse, but it's either that or Daisuke was just a big fan of mediocre 90s werewolf movies. Milia might have the largest collection of countries represented in her moveset. She's like the United Nations of heavy metal, which kinda sounds like an awesome idea. I want to see that. So okay, that wraps up Milia, but before we go any further, let's take a real quick detour here for a second. I've been talking all throughout this video about these characters' overdrives, which is what they call supers in Guilty Gear, but do you know where the term overdrive comes from? Well, if you're a guitarist, you probably know the answer. An overdrive is a little electrical device that you can plug one end into your guitar and the other end into your amp, and then you can use it to adjust and enhance the sounds that come out of your guitar. Could this be a coincidence? Maybe, but considering that every time I see Daisuke Ishiwatari he's holding a guitar, yeah, I don't think so. I think this one is a pretty safe bet. Then we come to Zato 1, who again, his name is not based on a band, but I do love where it actually comes from, so I'm going to share it anyways. He's blind, and in Japanese, 1 is pronounced Ichi, so you could say that his name is technically Zato Ichi. In other words, the same name as the legendary blind samurai. But we're here to talk about music, and while Zato might not be a reference to anything, his little buddy Eddie sure is. Now, I'll admit, back in the day, I used to think that Eddie was meant to be a reference to the Marvel Comics character Venom, because he's a little black gooey creature, and at one point he ended up bonding to the body of his blonde host, kind of like what happened to the Venom symbiote and Eddie Brock. But no, it's actually way simpler than that. Eddie's name comes from the Iron Maiden mascot, Eddie. Like I said, if there's anything in this game that you're wondering, could that be an Iron Maiden reference? The answer is yes. As for their moves, they have one called Break the Law, which is probably a reference to the Judas Priest song, Breaking the Law. And he's also got a move called Rise and Fall, which is the name of a Halloween song. Also, his stage in the very first Guilty Gear game might be a reference to the Testament album cover, Souls of Black. Admittedly, claiming this is a Testament album reference felt like a little bit of a stretch to me, until I remembered that the mid-boss of the game is named Testament. Yeah, do I even need to go into detail on this one? They're named after the band Testament. And in case you think, no, they're just named after the Testaments from the Bible, in Guilty Gear Strive, they have an overdrive, Nostrovia, which is one of the songs by the band Testament. Also, in the character bios for Strive, they list off the clothing brands that each character wears, and Testament's clothes come from a company called LOW. And Low is also the name of an album from Testament. But the fun times don't stop there, because Testament is another one of those characters whose move list is just loaded with references. Most obvious one to me is their move Master of Puppets, which is named after the Metallica song of the same name, but that's not all. Badlands, Warrant, and Gravedigger are also moves named after bands. Their instant kill, Seventh Sign, comes from an Yngwie Malmsteen album, and their move Unholy Diver is a reference to Holy Diver, a song by Dio that I have spent the majority of my life trying to get unstuck from my head.
Holy diver, you've been down too long in the midnight sea.
And that's all I'm going to play of that song. In case you guys were wondering, hey Thorgy, which song was it that kept getting copyright claimed? It was him, Dio. Also should mention in Guilty Gear Strive, Testament wears a big fog hat, which is probably a reference to the guitarist Slash from Guns N' Roses. In fact, I'd even be willing to say that might be why when you finish a round in Guilty Gear, instead of saying KO, it says Slash. Yeah, Daisuke likes Guns N' Roses, and he made a fighting game, and there's a member of Guns N' Roses whose name sounds like an attack. There's a real good chance he probably just picked that name up and put it directly into this game. And lastly, that brings us to the big boss of the game, Justice, and wow, what a drop off from Testament. This is another one where people have theories, but they don't hold a ton of water. The only one that is worth mentioning is that their move Gamma Ray is a reference to the German band of the same name, which is worth mentioning because that band was founded by the lead singer of Halloween. I told you that was one of Daisuke's favorite bands, although I will mention that the stage for Justice is called Heaven. and there is a massive stairway in it. When I first started playing Guilty Gear and I didn't know that everything in this game was supposed to be a reference, I remember getting to this stage and my exact words were, "Oh hey look, a stairway to heaven. I wonder if that was on purpose." And now writing this in the future, I can say to my past self, yes, that definitely was on purpose. However, that's just talking about the architecture of this stage. The stage itself, heaven, is probably also another reference. I mentioned that our protagonist, Soul Bad Guy, was named after Freddie Mercury's solo album. Well, on that album, there is a track called Made in Heaven. Now, I know that sounds like I'm reaching, but if you know the lore, and you know the connection that Soul Bad Guy and Justice have, it makes complete sense that the two of them would have an overlap in their inspirations. These two characters are eternally connected to each other. And that's it, that is all the references worth mentioning from the original Guilty Gear characters. Time to move into the X Games, which introduced so many beloved new fighters. We'll start off with some of the quicker ones. Robo-Kai has a move called Aces High, and while that is a pretty generic name, it could possibly be a reference to the Iron Maiden song of the same name, and as I have said many times, if something possibly could be an Iron Maiden reference, it probably is. Then ABBA has a move called Keeper of the Keys, and there was a heavy metal album called Keeper of the Seven Keys. I don't know, that one feels like a little bit of a stretch and... Oh wait, what's that? Keeper of the Seven Keys was an album by Halloween? Oh, never mind, that is totally a reference. Also, her name is more than likely a salute to the Swedish pop band ABBA, but man, compared to all these heavy metal bands, ABBA feels real out of place. Don't get me wrong, ABBA's great, nothing against ABBA. I've boogied down to Dancing Queen more times than I would like to admit. Top 40 songs are in the top 40 for a reason, people. But this is probably the only time you're ever going to see ABBA side by side with Metallica and Iron Maiden. Then again, Daisuke is a man of many tastes. Although speaking of ABBA, I want to take this opportunity to correct something that I've been mistaken about in the past. When I did our BlazBlue video, I said that ABBA was actually created by Maury P., the guy who went on to create BlazBlue. Turns out that was a massive oversimplification. Yes, a follower pointed out to me that when people say Maury P. created ABBA, what they mean is Maury P. proposed to Daisuke the concept of a character who swapped between two different stances, and Maury P. wanted it to be an old fisherman, and Daisuke heard that and said, "Goth homunculus lady, got it." So, yeah, turns out that ABBA is also like 90% a creation of Daisuke Ishiwatari. I do want to make sure that everybody understands, there were many people out there who worked on Guilty Gear over the years, many people had their fingers in its creation, there's a lot of influence that came from a lot of different people on this staff. But the more that I find out about the creation of these characters, yeah, Daisuke really was heavily involved in almost all of it. Then Zappa is named after musician Frank Zappa, but beyond that, he's got a lot of moves that people think could be references to songs, but none of them felt that right to me. They didn't really feel that convincing. Although I would like to remind everyone, we are only covering the musical references, because all three of these characters so far are loaded with references to animes and movies and whatever else these developers felt like throwing in there. Then Anji Mito gets his name from the Japanese band Anji and their lead singer, Mito Hananosuke. So the band Anji and their leader Mito was the inspiration for Anji Mito. I don't think anybody's gonna argue with that one. Everyone's favorite bounty hunter Bridget has a move called Kickstart My Heart, which comes from the Motley Crue song, and her teddy bear Roger might be named after Queen's drummer Roger Taylor. Normally I wouldn't include something like that, but you know what? It's Queen, odds are it's correct. And speaking of Roger, Bridget has several moves where this adorable teddy bear is referred to as a killing machine, and Killing Machine is a song by Judas Priest. Then we come to Venom, who shares their name with a British black metal band. His overdrive attack, Dark Angel, comes from an 80s American thrash metal band, and his original instant kill, Dimmu Borgir, shares its name with a Norwegian black metal band. Then we come to Johnny, who is a cowboy who is decked out all in black. And I remember when I first picked this game up and I saw him, my first thought was, oh hey, it's Johnny Cash. Yeah, for anyone who doesn't know, Johnny Cash was a famous Southern singer-songwriter who was often referred to as the Man in Black. In fact, I think this might have been the very first thing that I saw in this game that made me realize, wait, is Guilty Gear all about music? Outside of that though, Johnny might be the winner of most things that could be a reference, but yeah, I'm not sure. Like, everything about him is one of those, it's a reference, but only if you tilt your head and squint and change a couple layers around kind of things, so yeah, I'm not counting it. But okay, those were all easy ones. Let's get to my favorite entry in this entire video. Slayer. Slayer is nothing but references. He is a walking collection of references in the shape of a man. Most of them are real quick and basic, but then there's one that is really interesting. Let's speed run through the easy ones. Slayer's name comes from the band Slayer. Many of his moves are references to bands or albums. Helter Skelter by Beatles, Undertow by Outrage, Royal Hunt from the band of the same name, and it's been a while since we got a Queen reference, so don't worry, Slayer has 5 of them. His moves Dead on Time, Under Pressure, It's Late, and his Instant Kill All Dead all come from Queen songs, and his overdrive attack Eternal Wings comes from their song Spread Your Wings, which in Japanese was called Wings of Eternity. So okay, simple, easy, done. Now on to the cool one. Slayer is actually based on the Lord of Darkness himself, Ozzy Osbourne. Alright, hear me out. Slayer is a vampire, and because of that, he has bats all around him. They appear in so many of his moves and in his presentation. Well, there is a famous story about Ozzy Osbourne that in his early career, he once bit the head off of a bat on stage. A lot of people have argued that this is just an urban legend and it didn't really happen, and I am here to tell you, no, it's real. That actually happened. But what makes the story crazy is it didn't happen on purpose. No, some kid in the audience at one of his shows just threw a dead bat up on stage, and Ozzy, not being the most stable person at this point in his life, saw it and thought it was a toy. And he figured, oh, they want a show, huh? Well, I'll give them a show. Ooh, look at me. I'm the big, scary, dark master of evil. I'm picking up a bat. Ooh, look at me. I'm gonna bite its head off. And then as he bit into it, he snapped out of it as he heard his future wife off stage screaming at him, "It's real, you dummy! Throw it back!" Well, I'm sure it was that and also a combination of him wondering, hey, where did all this blood in my mouth suddenly come from? Again, I'd like to remind you, Ozzy wasn't all there back then. The show was immediately canceled as Ozzy had to be raced to the hospital for rabies shots, but eventually Ozzy decided to embrace this story and he decided to make bats a prominent symbol for himself. Now, I know what you might be thinking. So what? So what if Ozzy is associated with bats? Slayer is a vampire. Vampires are naturally associated with bats. Are you saying that all vampires are based on Ozzy Osbourne? No, but they'd be way cooler if they were. No, the thing that tipped me over the edge on this one is remember how I said Ozzy realized he bit into the bat because he heard his future wife screaming at him off stage? His future wife, Sharon Osbourne? Well, Slayer is constantly seen standing beside his wife. She's in all his intros, she's in his story mode. This dude loves his wife and is always talking about her. What's his wife's name? Sharon. Yeah, I am standing behind this theory. I say Slayer is totally inspired by Ozzy Osbourne. Then we come to a fan favorite who everybody's been talking about recently, Jam Karadaberry. Now I'll admit, when I first started to realize that all the characters in this franchise were named after music, I thought that Jam Karadaberry was just named after jam. Not the food, I mean that thing that musicians do when they all just hang out and play their instruments together. But nope, turns out that back in the 90s, there was a Swedish pop band called Cloudberry Jam. And in Japanese, Cloudberry would be pronounced kind of like Cloudberry. So, Jam Karadaberry gets her name from Cloudberry Jam. By the way, quick side note, Cloudberry Jam, I had never heard of them before making this video. Really good, but very different from pretty much everyone else that we have talked about today. Give them a listen if you just want something to chill out to on a lazy Sunday.
Can I do more than wait and see? Everything that might have been okay rushed upon me as it always do.
But now we come to Dizzy, and oh man, Dizzy has to have a ton of references. I mean, her entire design feels like it came out of an 80s heavy metal album cover. The giant Grim Reaper and Angel designs just scream rock and roll. So what references has she got? Not many. Yeah, this shocked me. I seriously thought she was going to be at the top of the list, but nope. One of her moves is called Hunger Strike, which is also the name of a Temple of the Dog song. And she was probably named after Guns N' Roses keyboardist Darren Dizzy Reed. And yeah, that's it. Those are the only two that actually sound like they're possible, and even beyond that, there aren't even a ton of theories that people have about Dizzy. She is shockingly straightforward. Well, that's a shame. I was really expecting to end this game on a character who was just low with musical references, but if Dizzy doesn't have any, then who could possibly— There she is! Okay, hold on to your butts, everyone, because Ino is loaded with musical references, and how can she not be? Just look at her. First up, her name. There's a lot of theories about what it could be a reference to, and originally I thought it was a reference to the Prince song, I Know, but turns out I was wrong. According to the Guilty Gear XX Midnight Carnival Encyclopedia, her name likely comes from English musician Brian Eno. Then her design was heavily inspired by Japanese musician Ringo Shiina. They have the same haircut, the mole in their face is in the exact same spot, they use the same type of guitar, and they even have the exact same height and birthday. Yeah, I kept joking that this was just Daisuke's Rock and Roll Smash Bros. This is probably the closest he got to actually just shoving in here a real human being. In fact, you could even argue that Daisuke did literally put Ringo Shiina in this game, because there's a chunk of Ino's original theme, Kagimatsuri, that just straight up lifts itself from Ringo Shiina's song Mellow. Again, I have to thank one of our followers for pointing that one out to me. I do not have an ear to match tracks together on my own, so I never would have caught this one. In fact, speaking of that, so many people have told me that Ino's victory animation has her playing some of the chords from Metallica's One. I do not hear this one at all. Yeah, I read a lot of reports that this was taken from Metallica's One, but I just could not make it out. But then so many people kept contacting me and telling me that it was indeed true. So, you know what? Considering that I suck at identifying music, I'm just gonna trust you guys on this one. Then as for her moveset, Chemical Love is a reference to the Stevie Wonder song, and her big super move Megalomania is named after the song by Outrage. Originally I said this was based on the Black Sabbath song of the same name, but then someone pointed out to me that Outrage also has a song by this name, and you know something? Considering that the lead singer of Outrage became the lead singer for Guilty Gear shortly after this, and Ino's theme in this game is called Midnight Carnival, which is also an Outrage song, yeah, I'd say they're right about this one. And that's it for the X series, which means that it's time to move on to, not you, yeah, that one. Yes, the often forgotten about non-fighting game installment of Guilty Gear 2 Overture. There weren't a lot of characters introduced in this installment, but there are some that are definitely worth mentioning. Kai and Dizzy's son Sin first appeared in this game, and while it's totally possible he is just named after, you know, the concept of sin itself, he could also be named after the song Sin by Nine Inch Nails, or the song Sin by Stone Temple Pilots. However, I have to point this out. There is a Christian rock band called Sin Dizzy, and while I think this is the least likely option simply because I don't know if Daisuke is up on his Christian rock bands, holy cow, how wild is it that there is a band out there that has both Sin and his mother's name, and it might not be where this character comes from. Then after that we got a lot of characters who weren't really that important after this game, and they don't appear to have any references that are worth mentioning. But there was one final character in this game who is worth talking about, Raven. Now, their name could be a reference to the actual bird itself, but it's more than likely a reference to the British black metal band also named Raven. And his instant kill is called... I'm sorry, I'm not even going to try and attempt that one, I know I'll butcher it. But that is also the name of a Rammstein album. After that, there isn't really anything else that I can definitively say is a reference. But there is one theory that, even though it feels like a stretch, is so wild that I have to share it. Raven's backstory is that he had powers that he used to heal and care for the poor and sick. He went to a village and he helped them, but then he had to leave because other villages needed his help too. He was then punished by the government for using his powers and was even killed, only to rise again a few days later, making him something of a Jesus parallel. He then returned back to that original village that he had helped, but now everyone there hated him for leaving to go and help other villages. Why am I bringing this up? Remember much earlier when I said Testament had a move that was a reference to the song Holy Diver by Dio? Do you know what the story behind Holy Diver is? I always thought it was about drugs and all that talk of tigers and midnight seas was just a metaphor, but nope. According to Ronnie James Dio himself, the story of Holy Diver is about, and this is the exact way that he described it, it is a story of a Christ-like figure on another planet who helps the people of that world, but now he must go to another planet to help those people, but it results in him being killed, only for him to then be resurrected and returns to the first planet, except now they all hate him for leaving to help the other planets. It's literally the exact same plot. Do I think this is actually where Raven's backstory comes from? Honestly, no. I think that if Raven is based on anything, it probably is just a Jesus parallel, as I said earlier. I think this is just a crazy coincidence. But holy cow, that is one crazy coincidence. And you know something? If there is anyone I can see saying, I want to make a character based entirely around Holy Diver, it's Daisuke Ishiwatari. Then I did say that we were going through all the references in Guilty Gear, so you know what? Guilty Gear 2 Overture isn't the only spin-off this series has had. Guilty Gear had 2 handheld games that appeared on the Wonder Swan, Guilty Gear Petite and Guilty Gear Petite 2. And that game introduced a brand new character, Fanny. And this is another character that people have multiple theories about where her name could come from. But the two that feel the most likely to me are that there's an all-female rock band called Fanny, so it could be taken from that, or considering that Daisuke is such a big Queen fan, there is a song from them called Fat Bottom Girls, which has the lyric,
Left alone with big fat fatty, she was such a naughty natty.
with any other band, I would have said that one is definitely not likely, but it's Queen, so it's our top contender right now. Then one more spin-off to go through, Guilty Gear Izuka featured maybe the weirdest character in this entire franchise, and boy is that saying something. A gear whose body is a giant mutated dog, Leopoldin. I do not have time to get into all the weird backstory surrounding Leopoldin, so for now I'll just say that their name comes from a Japanese house band, and let's move on. But that brings us to the Guilty Gear Xrd Games, and you know what? We were just talking about a weird character, let's keep that train rolling. Bedman. Now, Bedman, of course, isn't his real name. No, his real name is Romeo, and his sister's name is Delilah. Why is this important? Because Romeo and Delilah were the names of Freddie Mercury's cats. Damn, Daisuke went through all the band members of Queen, and now he has to start looking at their pets for inspiration. Also, the name Bedman might be a reference to the 70s rock band Bedemon. Originally, I thought this was probably the full inspiration for this character of being a fighter in a robotic bed. But then some fans point out to me that there is an anime, Rujin Z, which is about a robotic bed that goes nuts, and yeah, I think that's more likely. And after that, his instant kill, Theater of Pain, is a reference to the Motley Crue album of the same name. Although in that instant kill, he sucks people into a theater that is in his dreams. So in other words, it is a dream theater. So I have heard people say that this was inspired by the band Dream Theater. Then we come to Leo Whitefang, and this one is tough. It's definitely based on something, but there's multiple theories. There's a Danish band called White Lion, and hey, Leo Whitefang, White Lion, yeah, I can see it. But then there's an American thrash metal band also called Whitefang. There's a handful of other options, but these two seem like the most plausible to me. And then Leo is German, and boy does he let you know that. Both of his moves, Ison Sturm and Blitzschlag, are named after German bands, and when he gets hit with Faust's Overdrive and Strive, he shouts out, both of which are also names of German bands. Then we come to Koom and Answer. There really isn't much to say about Koom and Answer. Koom's name is a reference to the Gyum, which is the Korean name for that instrument she plays. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Everything else I saw was just a theory. And Answer's theme is called Enough is Enough, and Answer works for Chip, who, as we established earlier, was a reference to the lead singer of the band Enough's Enough. So that's definitely something, but yeah, that's all I got. Then again, both of them have only been in one game so far, so hopefully they get to return and strive, and then we can see a little bit more from them there. Then our next character from the Xrd Games is Aerials, or as many of you might know her, who? Yeah, quick sidebar here for a second, but this has been bugging the hell out of me for years. The big villain of the story of Guilty Gear Xrd was this character, Aerials. who was not playable in the game. There was no boss fight against her. There's nothing. Why the heck would you create a character to be the big villain of your story mode and have her only appear in the story mode that you can't play, you can only watch? There are big Guilty Gear fans out there who have zero idea who this character is, despite what a massive important role she played in one of the most famous Guilty Gear games. Fingers crossed she does finally get added as a playable character in the upcoming season of Guilty Gear Strive. However, we ain't here to talk about that, we're here to talk about musical references, and she actually has a couple. First off, her name, Aerials, could be a reference to the System of a Down song, Aerials. And as for her appearance, she's got skull makeup, and she also wears a giant Pope-like hat. And shockingly enough, there are multiple musicians this could be a reference to. If I had a nickel for every lead singer of a band who wore a Pope hat and skull makeup, I would have 2 nickels, which isn't much, but it's weird that it happened more than once. Yes, it could be a reference to Papa Emeritus, the lead singer of the Swedish metal band Ghost, or to Danish rock star King Diamond. Or you know what, considering the fact that multiple people apparently have this idea completely separate from each other, maybe Daisuke Ishiwatari just thought it up himself. But that brings us to the final 3 characters from the Xrd Games, the Valentine sisters. Yes, I know there was a 4th Valentine who appeared in Guilty Gear 2 Overture, but as I said earlier, there really wasn't much to say about her. A lot of people had theories that her name came from one song or another that had Valentine in it. I think their names just come from Valentine's. You know, the date. A lot of games and animes love to have characters named after that holiday, so I think that's all there is to it. However, with these 3 characters, yeah, there's definitely some ground to cover. Some very hazy and confusing ground. Because first up we have Ramlethal Valentine, and there is no way Ramlethal isn't a reference to something. Nobody just pulls the name Ramlethal out of thin air. However, yeah, I have no idea where it comes from. I have read all the theories that people have on it, and the only one that feels even halfway decent is that it's a combination of the Swedish band Ram and the American band Lethal. Feels like a stretch, but I think that's the best we're gonna get. After that, her only other reference is that she has a move called Calvados, and there is a Russian thrash metal band named Calvados. Next up is Elfelt, and shockingly enough, her name is not a band reference. It's a reference to a brand of rifles, which makes sense, she fights with guns after all. In fact, she doesn't just fight with guns, she fights with guns and a bouquet of roses. She fights with guns and roses. Guns and I don't know why I'm trying to phrase this like it's a tease. You all figured it out immediately. Yeah, her whole existence is a reference to the band Guns N' Roses. In fact, this is one of my favorite Easter eggs in the entire series. Her birthday is on Christmas, December 25th. You know who else in this game shares that birthday? Axel and Dizzy. In other words, the 2 characters named after Guns N' Roses members. That's actually awesome, I love that. And as for her appearance, she dresses like a bride and she's obsessed with marriage, and I've heard so many people have theories on why this is, what song it could be paying tribute to. I think it's just because there was a wedding in the Guns N' Roses music video for November Rain. I think that's all it is. However, in Guilty Gear Strive, Elfelt went through a massive redesign. She was still bubbly and upbeat and obsessed with marriage, but now she was the lead singer of her own death metal band. And I've heard many people say that this is supposed to be a direct reference to the band Baby Metal, which, as you can probably guess from the name, is a heavy metal band that is meant to incorporate many elements of Japanese idol groups. And full disclosure, at first I thought Elfelt was probably just inspired by this idea, like, oh, an idol group and a heavy metal group coming together. Yeah, that's something that could work for Elfelt, but it's not like Baby Metal is the only band out there that meets that requirement. She's probably more of just an homage to this particular type of music. However, the more time has gone by, the more I've started to think, you know, that skirt that she now wears kinda looks like the outfits that Baby Metal wore in their big breakout music video. And her theme in Strive even shares some similarities with their tracks, with how it goes back and forth between upbeat and poppy and then screaming rock. So you know what? Yeah, I think people might have a point on this one. There's something to this idea. And the final character from the Xrd Games to talk about, we have Jacko Valentine. Obviously, with a name like that, she is a reference to Halloween. Oh wait, I misread that. I meant Halloween! Yeah, that's right, they finally returned. You see, Halloween has a mascot. That mascot's name? Jacko. And her instant kill was called I Want Out, which was the name of a Halloween song. It's very clear to me that while Daisuke's favorite band is Queen, it really looks like his second favorite is Halloween, which makes it kind of great that Soul Bad Guy and Jacko Valentine ended up hooking up. It's literally a marriage of his two favorite things. But beyond that, on her pants leg, you can see the name Gallows Eve, which you might think is a reference to All Hallows Eve, another name for Halloween, but nope, it is a reference to the Canadian metal band of the same name. And lastly, her stage in the game is called Heaven's Edge, which is a really great allusion to her relationship with Justice. Again, we'll save that for the big lore video one day. But it is also the name of an American glam metal band from the 80s. And that's it, we're through the Xrd characters. Honestly, shocked there wasn't more to talk about in there. Probably just because these characters have been in fewer games. Or maybe it's because as time goes on, as Guilty Gear becomes more popular, and as the internet has given us access to more information, maybe Daisuke is realizing, oh crap, if I name every character after a band I like, then there's a good chance those bands will find out and be mad at me. I'm just kidding, that is totally not a thing that Daisuke Ishiwatari is worried about, as you will now see as we come to Guilty Gear Strive. Because Guilty Gear Strive might have the biggest musical illusion in this entire franchise, and shockingly enough, it doesn't come from the characters. It comes from the lobbies. Yeah, the online lobbies for this game have you enter a tower that you have to make your way up, with stronger opponents being set at higher levels. And each of these levels are a reference. Okay, let's start at the very bottom. We got System of a Down, which I really hope I don't need to explain to any of you is a badass metal band from the 2000s. But I will say, I do wonder how they would feel learning that their name is in this game. Like, imagine you learned someone named an online player ranking system after you, but you were assigned as the worst rank. I mean, I get it, they have down in their name. It makes sense that they would be at the bottom, but still, that's gotta be rough. But as we move up, the next level is named The Night Comes Down, which is probably this low because it also has down in the title, but considering it's the name of a Queen song, yeah, Daisuke was not going to make it the bottom level. Then, speaking of the director's favorites, next is a Halloween song, Future World. Then Alive or Just Breathing, which is a song by Killswitch Engage. And just to editorialize for a second, I love that this is the name of the fourth level. Like, at this point, you're starting to get out of the beginner class, so it's time to ask, okay, are you just hitting buttons or are you starting to figure this out? Are you alive or are you just breathing? That's actually pretty good, I like that. Then at the exact halfway point, we got Still of Night, a Whitesnake song. Makes sense, it's floor 5 of 10, the middle of the road, so Stillness is a fitting name. But then after that, things start to ramp up a little bit. You're now entering the higher levels of gameplay. You're going to be facing tougher opponents. So this game tells you, alright, you're now out of that training section. Time to go on the offense. This is an aggressive game. You're kicking ass. We're gonna give these floors names that match that. You got Symphony of Destruction by Megadeth, Rain and Blood by Slayer, The Hellion by Judas Priest. Then for the penultimate floor, you've got Fade to Black by Metallica, an appropriate title for the You're Nearing the End floor. And then finally, on the very top, you got Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin, going all the way back to the reference made on the boss stage of the very first game. But that's not all. After you get all the way through the tower, you're then allowed to access the highest floor of them all, an honor reserved only for those who have proven they have nothing left to prove. And now you can finally enter... Wait. Celestial? You had 10 stages with song and band names in a row, but the top one is just called Celestial? Dude, Nirvana was right there! Well, I guess it would be weird to call it Nirvana since that was already the name of a stage back in the X Games. See, I didn't forget, I was saving it for just this moment. Speaking of stages, I can't find a lot of musical inspiration for them in this game, but one of the first stages that was shown off was Lars Canyon, and considering how much Daisuke Ishiwatari loves Metallica, it's probably a reference to their drummer Lars Ulrich. But time to get to the new characters and wrap up this video that I thought would only be like 20 minutes long. I am very bad at planning my videos out. First up, a couple quick and easy ones to run through. Nago Ryuki's name probably comes from the 1970s song also called Nago Ryuki. Although considering this is what that song sounds like, yeah, that's a pretty big split from the source material if that's true. However, I'm still going to go with it because Nagoriyuki is not that common of an expression. Nagori essentially means an appreciation for a fleeting moment, and Yuki means snow. So it is the kind of thing that you could hear people in Japan throwing around, but it's still specific enough that I do feel like it was probably inspired by something, and this song feels like the best bet. Then Yunika has the word Thunderstruck on the side of her gun, a reference to the song by the same name by AC/DC. And if you don't think that's right, the gun also has the code AC43 on the side, and the fourth and third letters of the alphabet are D and C, meaning this just flat out says AC/DC on it. Genuinely shocked this is our first AC/DC reference. It feels like that's a band that Daisuke would have been talking about this entire time. But as for her moveset, Yunika's overdrive is called Mega Death Buster, which is of course a reference to the band Buster. I'm kidding, it's a reference to the band Megadeth. You all knew that the second that you heard it. Although speaking of that, got a fun bit of headcanon I want to share. Gears, the big magical robots that mankind fought for over 100 years in the Guilty Gear world. Again, we'll do a lore video one day, I swear. But Gears have different classifications, and Megadeth is the highest, most dangerous class. While Dizzy is one of the strongest Gears, meaning she would be Megadeth class. And Yunika is Dizzy's daughter. Again, total headcanon, I do not believe that anybody at Arxis actually thought about that when they gave her the move Megadeth Buster, but until anyone tells me otherwise, I'm saying that's the actual lore reason for why her move is called Megadeth Buster. Then Giovanna has a move called Sepultura, which comes from the name of a Brazilian metal band, and I just want to sidebar here for a moment real quick. I've said many times that one of my favorite things about fighting games is that it brings together all these characters from different corners of the world, and I love that with Guilty Gear, Daisuke is also doing that with his musical taste. He didn't just want to make the cast international, he also wanted to make all of the musical references international. I kind of like that. But aside from that, yeah, that's all I could find for Giovanna. Although, she does work for the Secret Service, and the Guilty Gear Strive story mode, we see that there is another Secret Service agent named Dawkins. And Dawkins is another band with several hits under their belt, although I will always know them as the guys who sang Dream Warriors in Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3. Now, speaking of the Secret Service, that's a segue I've never had to do before, that brings us to Gold Lewis Dickinson. Now, his name could possibly come from two sources. The name Gold Lewis could be an homage to Gord Lewis from the Canadian band Teenage Head. Then I'm pretty confident that the last name Dickinson comes from the singer Bruce Dickinson. Why do I feel so confident about that one? Because Bruce Dickinson was the lead singer of Iron Maiden, and not only have we established by now that Daisuke really likes Iron Maiden, but also Gold Lewis Dickinson carries around a giant metal coffin. Which, okay, granted, is not an Iron Maiden, but it's pretty darn close, you gotta give me that. However, if you're looking for something a little more modern, Gold Lewis Dickinson in the story is the Secretary of Defense. Except that in the trailers, he is not referred to as the Secretary of Defense. He is referred to as the Secretary of Absolute Defense. Why would they call him that? Is it just because it sounds more badass? Maybe, but it could also be because Secretary of Absolute Defense is abbreviated as SOAD, the same abbreviation as System of a Down. You think that's a stretch? Well, I'll admit, so did I, until I remember that his overdrive is called Down with the System. Yeah, I'd say that makes this assumption a little bit safer. Also, his other overdrive is called Burn It Down, which could be just a generic name for a giant laser beam attack, but I think it's actually a reference to the Linkin Park song. Also, it just occurred to me, Linkin Park and System of a Down, this means that Gold Lewis Dickinson has some of the most recent references of anybody in this game. Granted, those references are still like 20 years old, but when all the other references are pushing 40, it's still an accurate statement. Next up, the scourge of top 8s everywhere, Happy Chaos. Now, going into this character, I thought he was going to be a gold mine. I thought he was going to be loaded with references. I mean, just look at him. He looks like every rock and roll fever dream all thrown into one body. If I knew nothing about Guilty Gear and you told me this guy was the mascot for a forgotten 80s metal band, I would believe you and I would ask no follow-up questions. But I can only find 2 theories on him, one of which is confirmed, and the other one is kind of up in the air, but you know what? We're at the end of the video and it's interesting, so screw it, I'm gonna share it anyways. First up, the one that's definitely real. His car is named Lila Region, which in German means purple rain. Are we positive that Eno wasn't a Prince reference? That would have made their team up just so perfect. And lastly, the one that's just a conspiracy theory at this point. He's always got a big smile on his face and he wears glasses that are in the shape of X's. So this has made some people think that he is supposed to be a salute to the logo for Nirvana. And, maybe? I'm mostly just bringing this up because I want to put it out there. I would totally buy a shirt that was a parody of the Nirvana logo, but with Happy Chaos's face on it. Has anybody made that by now? It feels like somebody should have made that by now. But now we have come to the final character, at least for now. With Strive 2.0, this game is going to begin continuous new updates, so who knows who else could return or what new characters could be created. And it's appropriate that we are going out on this character, because Guilty Gear Strive became the first game in the series history where that man was playable. Yes, if you know your Guilty Gear lore, then you know about that man. Real name, Oscar R. Kreutz. He has been the big recurring threat for this entire series. He's been that character in the background throughout this entire story ever since the beginning, and this was the game that finally added him to the roster. So, yeah, Asuka has no musical references at all. That's right, the guy who has been talked about for 20 years now is like the only character that nobody even has theories on. And you know something? It feels very appropriate that the guy who spent the last 25 years being the big intimidating threat of this entire series should be the only one who has no musical references. He's the one that breaks this trend. And you know what? It feels like that's the whole moral of Guilty Gear. You need to get some music in your soul, otherwise you start doing crazy stuff like this. And that is it. We have come to the end of our show today. Like I said, I was not prepared for what I discovered when I started looking through all of these, but you know something? I'm still glad that we took this journey today, because I have said it before and I will say it again. One of the things that I love about Guilty Gear is that it really is just Daisuke Ishiwatari's passion project. From day one, this guy just said, I'm going to turn my vision into a game, and if that vision includes just putting every band he likes into the roster, then he was going to do it. And after all these years, I still think it's awesome that this game has not lost that personal touch. No matter how big it gets, no matter where the story goes, no matter how high the budget becomes, this is still just going to be a game about a guy talking about stuff he loves. And you know what? I think we can all admire that. Thank you to all of you for tuning in today. We don't normally do videos like this. We typically do more full-blown retrospectives. But if you want to see more stuff like this, more videos just delving into one weird corner of a game, then let me know that down below. Also, 2 more big thanks that I have to give. First up, to our patrons. As I said, we already got 1 copyright claim, and I knew that was going to be a thing that would probably happen when I delved into this topic. But it is through their support that I knew we would be okay if that happened. So if you want to join all those patrons whose names you're seeing on screen right now and get some behind-the-scenes bonuses, then check the description down below. And lastly, like I said, this was not the first time that I upload this video. We did put it up before and I had to take it down. And I want to thank everybody who pointed out all the things that I did miss in that original video. There were some real obscure things that you guys pointed out that went completely over my head. So again, thank you guys for your help on that. In fact, there's one fan who contacted me, and I'll just say this right now. A lot of the things that I covered in here are still just guesses. They're just theories that people have about this game. But there's one fan who contacted me and said that they and their friends are working on their own video that are based on the things that Japanese magazines have actually said are indeed references. And at the time of this recording, that video is not up. But when it does eventually go up, I'll put it in the description down below. So if you want to look at the more official, actually confirmed references, you can find it in that future video. Thank you all again for tuning in today to whatever this madness ended up becoming. Our next video is another builder roster that is on the way, so you don't have to wait much longer for a new episode of that. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Stay safe out there, and come back next time.